What's up, guys? Welcome back to Roensch Capital Charts. Today we're taking a look at Tesla stock, ticker symbol TSLA, on a variety of time frames in anticipation of the next trading day, Thursday, February 29th. Alright guys, so Tesla stock here today up $2.31 a share, 1.16%. The stock is down about a point after hours, $1.05 as of the recording of this video. Listen, if you're new here, get used to hearing me say this. I don't care if the stock is up 10 points in your favor after hours. I don't care if it's going against you 20 points and you're flipping out. If there is really no news catalyst pushing it and the volume is as low as it is here, which is going to be the majority of the days. If those two things are true, take after hours with a grain of salt, okay? Because the next day at open is the real test. But let's take a look at Tesla here today, just starting here on the 1-minute chart. You guys know I like to start these videos just by briefly looking at any intraday revenue generating opportunities that we saw that we could potentially look to replicate tomorrow. So you guys know I'm always watching Tesla for one of kind of two setups. Always a repeat offender setup I developed. It's a backbone setup of mine. I've utilized it for years now. And we kind of saw the early whisperings of that setup here. Right, these rejections off of that 2 standard deviation band. However, things just weren't kind of opened up enough, and I was really looking for a bigger pullback before another test that we just never got. And the other setup I'm kind of always looking for on a stock like Tesla, it's kind of tough to get edge on blue chips, so I have to be very specific about which trades I utilize for my playbook on blue chips, especially if they're not really technically in play, meaning they have a fresh news catalyst. There's a ton of eyeballs, more so than normal on it that day. The other kind of setup I'd really be looking at that does have edge is more of an intraday swing mentality upon big tests of like 1.5 plus pushes against its average true range, which, we didn't really see that level of volatility here today. I mean, we saw kind of a big move here, but, the ATR on Tesla, we've seen crazier things. So let's move on here to the 5-minute chart and do our volume profile part of the daily ritual here on Tesla. By the way, I am covering Tesla stock every single day. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see these videos each day or a few times a week or whatever. I have a goal. I'd like to hit 3,000 subscribers by the end of this week. Certainly not going to happen without your help. So if you're getting value, please join up the group. Just know I greatly appreciate it, and I'll continue to do my best to provide value here every single day. So here on the daily, the 5-minute volume profile, what I'm always looking at, what was the most obvious move or two, okay? And did we see any big changes in volume? So really what I'm looking at is this pullback here, because the open, we expect bigger volume, so we need to stay contextual. This pullback here, and then this pump. What do we see in terms of volume? And honestly, guys, it was a really normal fade through the morning. That to me is, you could cherry pick some things that support a bearish thesis. You could cherry pick some things that support a bullish thesis. This is a wash to me. I have to be just transparent. It's a wash. So that's kind of a net neutral here. So let's not waste any time. Let's move on. This is the 30-minute chart. This is where we like to look at, or start looking at, levels that I'm paying attention to coming into tomorrow. So clearly this 50 period here on the 30-minute chart, that white line, is very much so in play and a level of interest. There's clearly a lot of traders and institutions making decisions around that level, likely a lot of algorithms as well. Really simple here. If you're a bull, two things. Not only do we want to see a reclaim of that, I mean, we did hold that heading into the close. So to me, a break in after hours is less meaningful than it would be in regular trading hours. So we did hold that into the close. So the real test again is going to come tomorrow. And ideally, I'd like to see that hold above, or the stock kind of reclaim that 50 period and hold above into the close tomorrow. But not only that, obviously I'd like to see it hold above $200 a share. That would be ideal, just to keep that level a little more beefed up to the bullish side. If you are bearish on the name right now, two things. You want to see a hard rejection off of that 50 period on the 30-minute, head down toward the 200 period as quickly as possible, obviously. But also, ideally, that 50 period, you'd want to get down below that psychological area of $200 a share. All right. Now, moving on to the 4-hour, you can see that we have a tightening channel here between the 50 period, that white line, and the 200 period, the gray line. The 200 period has acted as resistance, or more so did today, to a T. So this chart becomes really interesting because $200 is what we're going to talk about in a second here, but you have kind of equally strong levels at equal distances away from 200 bucks a share, which is kind of where the stock is. So you could almost look at this chart from a technical and psychological perspective as binary, and maybe give the bulls just a slight edge here, being that the stock is kind of at like 201 and closed at 202 above 200. So that's kind of how I'm looking at the 4 hour here. It's kind of binary with just a slight edge to the bullish side because we've yet to give up 200 bucks a share. So obviously, you know, if you're a bull, a reclaim of the 200 period, since it has acted as resistance, is ideal. You're on the 4 hour in particular. And if you're a bear, your ultimate goal is to get down below that 50 period. But, you know, I think that's really all we can pull out of this 4 hour. So let's move on now to the most important chart of all, which is going to be the daily. Looking here, you know, yeah, that 50 period just is about 214.40, but not immediately relevant. What's the most obvious story here on the daily chart? Well, I mean, something really good happened today, guys. We reclaimed 200 bucks a share. You know, we closed at 202. Yeah, the stock's at 201, you know, after hours here. But we reclaimed 200 bucks a share. We were just below that yesterday. So clearly the story here on Tesla tomorrow, kind of the big picture, what I think is the most contextual, most important story, is 200 bucks a share. Because we closed just below it yesterday and we reclaimed it here today. And that is a huge psychological level, probably the biggest one we've seen in a long time here on Tesla. So, you know, if you're a bull, I'm thinking one thing tomorrow. Just hold 200 bucks a share. That doesn't mean we have to spike up to 215 tomorrow. Honestly, if I'm a bull, I'm thrilled if we close at 201.50 tomorrow. Now, I know some of you, maybe some of you have short-dated options that wouldn't necessarily be your bias, but, you know, fine. For me, I think 200 bucks a share is the real story, and any upside as a bull is absolutely welcome. I think bears have it a little bit tougher here, because really the primary objective of bears is going to be to give up 200 bucks a share. So close at, you know, 250 is, I wouldn't necessarily call that an immediate win. Bears, really, you're looking for a high volume crack downside of 200 bucks a share here tomorrow. Now, let's take a look at what was the bias in the options chain here today. 1.78 million total contracts traded, 1.035 million calls, and 744,000 puts. So we are seeing a call side bias here on the overall ratio today. The short-term speculators, the 0 to 20 delta range, those are those like kind of like cheapy, gambly, really speculative contracts that give us a good insight into what the short-term thesis or sentiment more so is. And it's certainly not overwhelming, but you are seeing a slight bullish bias. About 295,000 calls, about 266,000 puts. So a slight call side bias here. And as you go down the delta ranges, it is leaning call side on the majority of them. But once you get to deep in the money, it's actually leaning pretty heavily bearish. But understand that the volume is also quite a bit lower. So you have to consider, you know, that you could see one big trader kind of really throw things off. But this is pretty thrown off. About 64,000 puts and about 20,000 calls in that deep in the money range of the 81 to 100 deltas. And that is the more like longer term on average sentiment. The more longer term expirations, those are more expensive contracts. So it's uncommon to see that, but it is interesting that we're seeing that flip here of the more longer term bearish sentiment, but the overall ratio still sitting bullish. The short term ratio, slightly bullish bias here today. Again, this is just one factor of many. So while it may not feel good to consider both sides and not just cherry pick things that confirm your bias, I think it's incredibly important to do so. So make sure your risk is managed, whether this supports your bias or goes against it. And it's always more important to stay in the game than just win any one trade. It's just a trade. The real results are going to come from a bigger sample size of trades and the data working out in your favor over time, right? The math, the stats. Listen, if you got value out of this video, please subscribe to the channel. Again, hoping to hit 3,000 by the end of the week here. It's not going to happen without your help. Appreciate you guys. And also to all the membership options, which you can find at the link in the pinned comment, I recently added an in-play stock alert section just included with all the memberships. So I'm alerting stocks kind of as they hit kind of my scanners and also fit my criteria for primarily momentum stocks that are in play at that particular moment. What I mean by in play is that, you know, the majority of momentum traders around the world, since we're all kind of looking for the same thing, because it's, I think most traders, at least who trade momentum, come to the conclusion that the same kind of like elevated R vol, fresh news catalyst, things like that are the things to look for to really procure edge. So what you end up seeing is a lot of these same stocks who fit those same criteria kind of hit all the scanners in the world at once, and then you see a lot of traders trading the same stock, and that tightens up the liquidity for a period of time, and then it inevitably tends to fade. But it's really hard to find those stocks without the right tools, and the right tools are expensive. So I've included that section where I'll alert you guys to stocks that fit my criteria and I'm looking at as kind of in-place stocks during the day. So that comes with gold, gold plus UOA, and platinum. Hope to see you guys join. Again, the first link in the pinned, or the only link in the pinned comment. Appreciate you, and I'll see you tomorrow.